Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming out today. And I was asked to come up with a topic for these mayor's talks. And I know most of you who might have been here last year heard that I was talking about redevelopment. And I entitled that discussion Redevelopment 2.0 because it was an opportunity to start to think about where we were going to take the things that you already see happening. Where does that lead to? But in order to get to that, it requires a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of time-consuming information that we have to digest. And a lot of that involves numbers. So we have to understand how to use those numbers reliably in order to make the decisions that help guide townships. So the talk for today is on the numbers don't lie and how we use and rely upon those numbers to help us figure out where we're going with our vision for the township, and it explains a lot of the redevelopment that we're doing. So let's get started. So what I'd like to talk about first is the residential market here in East Brunswick as it stands right now. So I know these are hard to read, so I'm going to point out the things that I wanted to concentrate on. First, if you look at the graph on the right, that is home sales over the last 10-year period of time. And you can see that for the first probably 6-7 years, it was relatively flat, the sales price for homes in East Brunswick. But even starting before the pandemic, housing sales went up, prices went up. And it rose dramatically during COVID, during a time when we were in arguably a recession, and yet housing prices here in East Brunswick continued to climb. If you look year over year from this is an October 23 slide, if you compare it to the year before, on single-family homes, the average price went up about 24% in that 1 year period of time from October 22 to October 23. Townhomes went up 37.7% in that same period of time. Anybody in real estate, and I know there are people there, where's Carol? And they're going to their job. She's going to validate everything I tell you. Housing stock doesn't last here, and most of you probably know that. The average time that a house stays on the market here in East Brunswick is about 1 month, 1 to 2 months. The average price, like I said, continues to go up. And most people, if you want to buy a house here in East Brunswick, have to bid beyond the sale price that's being asked. That's not necessarily just happening in East Brunswick, but it's been happening here for a very long time. So clearly the residential for-sale market is booming here in East Brunswick, if you're lucky enough to even find something. Now, I know that there's an awful lot of talk about apartments and rentals. So let's go there right now, because that seems to be something everybody wants to talk about. So if you go to the rental market here in East Brunswick, and this information comes from rentcafe.com, and in 2023, they reviewed 137 different markets throughout the country. In that year, 2023, the Miami and surrounding areas finally surpassed North Jersey as the most expensive place to live in New Jersey. And Miami beat out Jersey City, which most of you probably didn't know, but in 2022, Jersey City was the most expensive rents in the United States. Last year, Miami surpassed it. And that means they eclipsed New York City and for San Francisco, places that had traditionally always held the top spots. But Central Jersey is recognized also as right underneath that in terms of the amount of sales and rentals that in terms of hot markets, this and the Philadelphia market. And that's going on despite the fact that we've seen an increased number of apartments, which we are required to be doing as part of our affordable obligation. I know everybody complains up and down the state. They see more and more apartments every time they turn around. That's not a surprise. That was planned development. And despite that fact, the apartments still are a hot market here in East Brunswick. And Central Jersey, compared to the U.S., you will see that the availability is only 5%, which isn't that much different than the national trend for availability for rentals, which is 6%. But the big difference takes us back to the cost of actual for sales. It's so difficult for people to find places that they could buy that the renewal rate in Central Jersey is well over 80%, where nationally it's in the 50s. That's because most people who are looking to find can't find it. It's so expensive. So they end up staying in their apartments. And so taking it right hyper locally, so when we talk about the apartment complexes that people refer to here all the time, oh, Mayor, how can you put another complex up? It's going to have an effect on the schools. It's going to have an effect on the ability to rent. There's going to be all these empty spaces. Well, let's look. Kensington, which is the apartment complex that sits between Walmart, right off of Mulbridge Turnpike, the last time we got data from them was when it was owned by Toll Brothers. It was recently sold to Edgemont, which is Jack Morris, and he isn't really so forthcoming with data. But before that, it was 92% occupied. 92%. We're looking at the property. It was built, say, on the corner of Somerville Road and Old Stage Road. That's about 100 apartments. In 6 months, it's virtually 90% sold out. And that, of course, includes the 20% set aside for affordable housing. The newest, Legacy, the one that's built right on Tyson's, that is only half built as it stands right now. There's the large apartment complex that sits right on Tyson's, and then there's 3 apartment complexes that are behind it. Some are stacked apartments, some are regular single-floor apartments. The 3 buildings in the back are approximately 75% occupied, and they only opened up right at in the winter. The big building in the front has about 189 units. They only opened up in mid-February, and as of a month ago, they already had rented out 45 or so apartments. So the rental market is very active here. And so when people come up to me and say, how can you keep building more apartments, which, by the way, are an obligation that the town has to do, like every other town, you cannot come back and say that these apartments are renting. So the market here in East Brunswick for residential is hot, and it has stayed that way for a long time, and our expectation is it will continue to do that. I know the slides are kind of hard to read. Over the last couple of months, Rob Zuckerman and I, he's our economic development officer you met before, we decided that it would be a good idea to hear about what people are saying from East Brunswick, from people that aren't obligated to tell us nice things. So we decided to go out and interview different realtors that work in the industry. Some who work in East Brunswick, some who do not work in East Brunswick. And our goal in trying to do that is the recognition of the fact that those are the people who are your first contacts with individuals who would be coming to look at potentially moving to East Brunswick. And it's important to us to know what they're thinking, because they can't know if you have a problem if you don't know what that problem is. So we asked them a series of questions. The first one was obviously, what were your top 5 reasons for moving to East Brunswick? And we had a sense that we knew what those answers would be, but we wanted to hear what they had to say from talking to people who were looking here. We also wanted to know that of those 5 top reasons, how would you weight them? It is safety and security your number 1 reason? If so, is that 90% of the reason, or is it 50% of the reason that you moved here? Is it the schools? Is it 100%? Well, how would you weight that response? We also wanted to know that if you had the chance to talk to your clients after they moved here, are they happy with the decision they made? Would they have changed anything? It's important information to know, and probably the most important question that we wanted to know was that of the people who might have considered other towns to move to besides East Brunswick, for those that chose to move somewhere else, where did they move and why did they do that? Because I can't know what the problem is if we don't know what it is. And then finally, based on their experience of listening to clients, if there's anything that we can do as a town to improve, what would that be? So those are the questions that we asked, and many of the responses were fairly predictable. By and large, families, young couples who may not have had children yet, primarily moved to East Brunswick because of our school system and the reputation that it holds. And whether they're pointing to our blue ribbon status or their high school or the sports programs or many of our accelerated programs, we also have a number of people that move here because of the quality of the special needs programs that we offer to our students. those were the main reasons people moved here. But while the public schools are still the number one reason that people move here, as opposed to a generation ago or more, where it was 90% of the reason that people moved here, it's now more like 60% of the reason that people move here. And that was pretty interesting and caused us to start to think, why is that the case? Is it other things that we're providing in the town that's now important to people moving here? Or is there something else that's going on? And what we found from many of them is that when they looked at our public schools, there were a lot of things that caused people to move here. But it was also, when you ask people who choose to move somewhere else, it was the number one reason that people chose to move somewhere else. So that was kind of paradoxical, and we tried to figure out what the reason was for that. And so what most of them have pointed to when you ask individuals, especially those that moved somewhere else, is that there's a lot of rating agencies out there that are rating public school systems. Not the least of which is the Department of Education itself provides that information regularly, annually to the public. In the rankings for whether it's niche.com or multiple sites have not shown that the East Brunswick school system is ranking as high as it did 10, 15 years ago. And people will point that out to you. And so when they look at that and they look at the options of moving to other towns, and we ask them where they move, many of them pick places like South Brunswick or Monroe or Manalapan and Marlborough, Westfield, West Windsor, Plainsboro. These are names that they throw out for many reasons, because they think that many instances, town, for instance, like West Windsor, Plainsboro, for the last 10 years have actually ranked higher than East Brunswick on the rankings. So if they're only looking at schools, they're going to move there. Some location is another factor, and so maybe for them, they need to be closer to the city, and so they don't need to have if a school is an A+, but they now moving to a district that is maybe an A, that's not that much of a difference. Some people want more land. Some people want a cheaper house. Some people want lower property taxes. And they become driving factors when other schools have been able to catch up. And the comments was that it's like the line that beware of the objects in the rearview mirror. They're a lot closer than they seem. Years ago, a generation ago, East Brunswick was miles away from most of the towns around us. It was an easy decision to move here for the schools. But if a lot of the other school systems around us have started to catch up, now there's a little bit more for them to think about when they make that decision. And some of them have chosen not to move here. So it's all fodder and things that we need to keep in mind if we're going to try to improve. The other reason that people move here to East Brunswick, and this is one that we have absolutely no control over, but it's a blessing, is our location. We have capitalized on trying to market it as the center of New Jersey. Now, geographically, the center of New Jersey happens to be Hightstown, but when you look statistically at population densities where people live, it's a little bit more north and a little bit more east of Hightstown, which puts you right in East Brunswick. So we are the statistical center of New Jersey, and we are capitalizing it from a marketing point of view, because no matter where you live in East Brunswick, you could be 15, 20 minutes close enough to a transportation center that can get you to Philly, can get you to New York. We have easy access to the major highways. We're right on the turnpike, exit 9 of a turnpike that has 18 exits, where you could get to Newark Liberty International Airport. So we have a blessing in our location, and we're going to capitalize on that. I do hear people, like all of us, whining and complaining about traffic. Brutus, get over that. You live in New Jersey, and it is an old state that has little infrastructure. You need to continue to invest in it. Our climate is not the same as Florida and Texas and some of those places that don't get the bad winters that we do, although we actually keep complaining about the best winter. But the reality is you got to invest in your infrastructure. And if you're going to move out of East Brunswick because you're whining and complaining about traffic, then get in your car and drive for a really long time. Don't stop in New Jersey. Don't stop in Pennsylvania. Don't stop in New York, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland. Just keep going. Because we all have that problem, and we just need to accept the fact that that's part of living here. Okay? The other thing that people point out, and this is something that has really become important to a lot of residents that move here, is the community. And I know that we use the word diversity all the time, but really it's kind of overused. And diversity can mean anything from looking at a piece of paper that has all the different ethnic and religious groups that live here, but that doesn't really have any meaning unless the township and the people and the schools embrace diversity, meaning that we celebrate the fact that people come. We put people on boards and commissions. We get them involved. They're on our sports programs. They're involved in all school events. The school and the town recognizes holidays and events that are particular to people that live in different ethnic or religious groups and celebrate that. And you kind of know when you really have gotten to a sweet spot when you have, for instance, a Lunar New Year celebration and half of the people that are there are not Asian. You're there because you want to really learn about other cultures, and that's what people see and say all the time to realtors when they come to East Brunswick, is that the fact that we are to embrace the diversity that's here, and that's something that's attractive to many people who want to move here. We also have, by the way, a diversity this day in incomes, and that has changed over the last decade. And by that, we see people from all different economic groups here in the township. And you can validate that by actually looking at the percentage of free or reduced student lunches in the school program. Now, just to set the table on that, in order to qualify for a free lunch in the school district, you have to make 30% above the federal poverty line. The federal poverty line for a family of four in the United States is $31,000 a year. So that means that in order to qualify for a free lunch, you need to make a little over $40,000 a year for a family of four. If you want a reduced lunch, it's 85% above the poverty line. For that same family of four, that would be about $57,000 a year annual income. Anybody want to guess what the percentage of students in the East Brunswick public school system who qualify for free or reduced lunch is?
Yes, they were. Sure.
What about that? You want to? 20%. I can tell you, as I was on the school board about 10 years ago as its president, we were in the single digits. That's a dramatic change in a 10-year period of time. So don't assume that everybody that lives here is affluent. I can assure you that the Department of Education does, because we're ranked as an I district. So when they determine how much school aid goes to your township, it's based on the affluence of your township. And I have to say that the numbers don't lie. The reality is that there's a growing disparity, or I guess a wide range of incomes here. Don't assume everybody is wealthy. And so I think that's important for us to keep in mind. We're also one of those communities that spent an incredible amount of time and effort to make sure that we support our park systems and our programs and our library and our community programs, and people are noticing that. And that becomes another reason that people end up moving here. And without taking away from the chief, even the third graders that come up to the township to do their field trip on learning about government, when I ask them, what is my number one job here in the township? And they get it right. It is to make sure that I take care of providing the safety and security for the people that live, work, and travel through this township. That's my number one responsibility. If I don't do that, everything else doesn't matter. And that's why I rely on a very professional staff of law enforcement. I don't tell them what to do. I'm not a law enforcement professional. They are. They know what they're doing. But their emphasis, just like the chief said earlier, is on community policing, making sure that we put an emphasis on connecting with the people that live and work and play in our community, and make sure that that is the forward face that they see on a regular basis, and what's resulted in trust in law enforcement, low crime rates here, which is a big reason why people move, and of course, the fact that their interaction, people who come back and tell us afterwards, who may not even have been happy with the outcome of their interaction, but they will tell you that in every instance, law enforcement was friendly and they were fair. And you can't ask for more than that. So that's the residential market. I'm going to move a little bit faster on the other markets here in town. People say all the time, real estate, nobody wants to do that. It's all empty. There's no, where's effort? Worth it to put any effort in trying to improve or increase office space? But I have to tell you, data coming back to us from the New Brunswick, East Brunswick, the Brunswick area. Now these statistics I'm giving you are more of a hyper look at the Brunswicks, our particular community. 5.8% vacancy rate is not terrible for office. I don't think most of you would have thought it's that low, but it actually is a fairly stable and vibrant market here in East Brunswick. We also have that 5.8% historically was higher than that the actual average historic vacancy rate was 7.2%. So for all the people who are so negative about office space, that's actually, we're actually doing not too bad. And office space predictability based on past history shows that we're likely to continue with these relatively low, stable vacancy rates over time. And they break that down into class 1 or class 3 and class 4 or 5 type of office space. The demand from the market we're hearing in general is that there's this huge demand for class 5 or top-notch office space. But in East Brunswick in particular, if you look at the areas that have been the most active, of the top 3, I'm going to drop out the middle one because it's not East Brunswick, but the 2 most active areas is Tower 1 and Tower 2 of the, right by the turnpike. So clearly, and if you talk to the owners of those properties, vacancy rates there, which were high during COVID, have actually dropped, and there's very little space that's left in those buildings. If you look at class 3 space, there's about 19 or 20 entries up there. Half of them are in East Brunswick. So there is an active office market here, and I think that the township needs to capitalize on that as we move forward in trying to provide where there is demand, which is in the higher grade office space. If you look at industrial, another area that's actually been relatively stable throughout New Jersey. New Jersey, because of our location so equidistant between New York and Philadelphia, there was a statistic that Rachel gave me the other day that if you had a cargo container that came into Elizabeth and started emptying its cargo onto trucks, that by the time they finished emptying all those cargo containers from the boat, that first truck would be in Ohio. The amount of commerce that comes through this state is incredible, and so that has laid fertile ground for all of these logistical type of industrial spaces that we're seeing dotted across most of our big highways in New Jersey. And so 6.1% vacancy rate isn't really that bad. And if you look and then again, also lower than our historical numbers. And those, as you can see from the forecasting, are expected to be relatively stable. The one area, and I can't really see it well in the slide, but there's a lot of different type of industrial space. And in this particular hypermarket, the areas in industrial space that they concentrate on is specialized office space, which is office space that's customized for particular issues. You might have, for instance, oil or ammunition or chemicals that need to be stored. And so the developer who's building those type of spaces really needs to earmark it particular to that type of industry. And we have that here. That's a big use of our space. Logistics, obviously, the most obvious one would be large centers such as Amazon, where they're storing and warehousing a lot of stuff that's going to be moved throughout our very busy corridors, highway corridors. But the one that really deserves attention is the flex space. That as companies that are considering moving to New Jersey, many of these evolving companies really like flex space because it gives them the opportunity to have office space, to have production space, and to have distribution space all in one particular building. And it's much cheaper than renting office space. So they like that. And unfortunately, a lot of our buildings are old. In order to retrofit them to some of these uses, such as healthcare uses and research and development, it needs redoing of their venting system and in many instances, the sewage system. So it's kind of hard to do that. But that's an area where I believe, and most industries, experts will tell you, is a growing trend. And I think if we put a line to that and start developing some of that, it will be in our advantage in the future. And then the last big area is the one that everybody seems to think that we're putting a pitchfork in, which is retail. Everybody, myself included, have gone on telling everybody about how retail is dead. Nobody buys anything in stores any longer. Everybody goes on Amazon. Nobody really knows what a store even looks like. But the reality is that here in East Brunswick, and it's been validated in many of the surrounding communities, that's not necessarily true. A 5.1% vacancy rate in retail is not terrible. And so really and again, against historical lows, that's not that far off. So we're really not doing that poorly in retail, and that's because the industry and the town have worked together to try and figure out what retail is going to work. So as you look at our efforts on Route 18, it's been designed towards converting the retail that didn't work, big box stores, into things that do. So you see healthcare services and services in general in the entertainment sector, things that you can't do from your computer, you can't order it online. So these are the things that you see happening. That will be augmented even further when the hockey rink gets built and when with two tennis centers that we have on either side of East Brunswick, Rock and Air, all of these type of entertainment venues drive people into a community. And when they come into communities for tournaments and all different types of sports events, what are they going to do? They're going to stay in our hotels. They're going to eat in our restaurants. So all of the businesses benefit if we plan this redevelopment the right way and give retail the opportunity to adapt to the environment that makes it work today. But it's not dead. So I guess if I wanted to sort of sum this up, the reality is that numbers don't lie, but they're a part of the picture. They're part of the way that we make decisions about where we're going and how that vision of the township is going to be structured. And it has to be fluid, and it has to be able to change because conditions change. COVID could not have been predicted when we started this 6-7 years ago. It has significantly changed our plans. We have apartments that are going to be slightly bigger because we now realize people will be more likely to be working virtually, even if it's in a hybrid schedule. We actually think that retail might work because if people are living in their home and not commuting into the city every day, they may actually use retail. So our numbers are important, but they're a moment in time. I remember when I started this at the very beginning, when I ran for mayor the first time, I looked up all this information and there were authors all over the place. James Hughes, who is a professor at the Blaustein School of Management right at Rutgers. Brilliant person, wrote a book on millennials are leaving and they're never coming back. They're all moving to the city. The suburbs are dead. Lee Gallagher, a editor for Business Magazine, Business Inc., wrote a book, the Death to the Suburbs. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a moment in time. They're all brilliant people. Their numbers are going to validate everything that they said. But do you really think that millennials that have moved to the city and are having a great time in the city and their job is right there, that they're never going to get married? I mean, they're getting married later, but most of them will probably get married. Are they never going to have children? No, they're not going to have 4 or 5 statistically. It shows that people are having less kids, but they will. Are they going to put them in the New York City public school system? Probably not. Some of them may be fortunate enough to put their kids in private school, but most of them won't. So all of that is a moment in time. You have to be able to take your numbers and be able to then use that and marry that with what you know about trends, your town, what you see going on around you. Keep your eyes open. And from all of that, you develop a plan. And so I can tell you that I'm in good company when I say that if you want to reliably predict the future, you just need to create it. So thank you.